Welcome to episode 5 of the Vada Studios podcast, Studio Confessions. With me today, I'm very pleased to have the singer, songwriter, frontman and guitarist from The Wonder Stuff, Mr. Miles Hunt.
Hello, Matt.
Hello, Milo. Nice to see you. Now, we've worked together on and off for a long period of time.
Yeah, we have.
And right now, we are currently celebrating 20 years to the day, pretty much.
Pretty much.
We were locked in a studio making the Wonder Stuff's 5th studio album, Escape from Rubbish Island. Now, you have had a pretty lengthy career.
Yeah.
You'd been making records quite some time before that. And I'd been obviously one of those huge fans.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you start? When was the first time you started making records?
The first actual record was 1986, September 86. We were in a studio, probably not far from here. It was Warwickshire somewhere, called The Barn. Pop Will Eat Itself had recorded perhaps their second single, Poppycock, there. And it sounded, a lot more professional than stuff that we'd all done at Rich Bitch Studios when Rich Bitch was very small, not the big complex it turned into in Selly Oak in Birmingham. So we went off to The Barn. Bass player, the dearly departed Rob the Bass Thing Jones, had won £1,500 on the football pools. Some of it he spent on a hearse, which he holidayed at the seaside in. And kindly, with another portion of the £1,500, paid for this recording session, which became our first single 4-track EP, which people call the Wonderful Day EP, because that was probably the lead track. So that was, September 86.
And then that was before you signed to Polydor.
Yeah, 2 years before.
And then the 8-Leg Groove Machine, you made that after signing to Polydor, didn't you?
Yeah. So we signed to Polydor December 87. And it never really felt like we were making an album, although we understood that's what we were doing. But the advice we'd got from the producer, Pat Collier, along with our A&R man, Graham Carpenter, was let's not put you in a studio for like 6 weeks and record what was our live set. Why don't you come in for 4 or 5 days at a time, go and do some gigs, come in for another 4 or 5. And that was great because it kept us, hot as a live band. So yeah, it took us another 2 years to get bogged down with studio fever. And of course we went into do the 8-Legged with a set of songs. We'd got probably 14 or 15 songs. And during the time that we were there, we wrote 2 more, one of which would be Grin, and the other one was No for the 13th Time. But everything else had been pre-demoed, pre-played, and yeah.
Okay, because that's the angle I got there straight away. The way my mind went was that the production idea was to get you out on the road, get you playing a little bit more, to try and develop the band's sound, to try and develop the songs that were probably on the offing and coming out in a sort of a demo form. But they were all ready to go.
Yeah. Everything else on the record. I mean, it pretty much runs as our live set at the time. We would always start with the opening track. Redberry Joytown was always our first track live, and Poison was always our last. And that's the way the album runs. Some Sad Someone, I suppose that and Rue the Day are the only tracks that you could call, little respites, ballads, whatever. And we would do Some Said Someone halfway through the live set. So yeah, it just ran as our live set.
So, that was the first time you were working with a proper producer.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you weren't being hugely produced as such. I mean, did a lot of, what it's like when a band signs a record deal, those songs that they have in the catalogue, you sometimes hear the demos of those songs and then you hear the record that eventually gets made and they bear no resemblance whatsoever to how they started. And you can go, oh yeah, that producer got their hands on them and that's why they became that. So the first time you made a record, you probably weren't hugely influenced by a producer because you were pretty self-sufficient.
I didn't really even know what a producer was back then. Graham Carpenter, the Polydor A&R man, he was smart. He's like, we just need to record what you do live. That was very much all that he required. And he said, Pat Colley is your man. And we're okay, well, what's he done? And so he played us, well, he told me to go and buy like the Weather Prophets, Primal Scream's first album, Sonic Flower Groove, House of Love. And I just remember thinking, wow, you can hear everything. Mm. Whereas when we recorded ourselves with engineers, basically, in smaller demo studios, you couldn't hear the separation between the guitars. So he did produce in so much as me and Mal probably just had the same sound. Mm-hmm. So one of them got cleaned up, one of them got dirtier. And
did he change the way in which you play off each other? Because the thing is, the amazing thing is the way you both work as two guitarists in synergy is that you do play off each other.
Yeah.
Those pockets, it's a real sound and has been forever.
Yeah.
Was that completely homemade and self-nurtured?
No, Pat did. Pat improved on that idea. But of course, I'd been a drummer before I was a guitarist. So this was the first band I was a rhythm guitarist in. And I wasn't much of a rhythm guitarist. And so really, Malk had written both parts. And so Malk wrote me simple things to play as a bed for him to do the flash stuff, as we probably called it at the time, over the top. So I wasn't really coming up with much on my own. Mm. So Malk was writing two guitar parts, basically. I think it's definitely how Eight-Legged Groove Machine would have started. But then Pat would go, he'd have ideas. There's a solo in Grin that we've used the trick a couple of times where Malk's playing this, and then he's like, okay, now start the octave of whatever that first note is and go down. And at some point they cross each other and there's a nice harmony there. So Pat definitely had an input on things like arrangements. I mean, I've got a demo of It's Your Money I'm After Baby where it's probably nearly 4 minutes long. There's only like 2 parts to the whole song. So it's like, well, we don't need half of the song. Just get rid of it. Let's bring it in under 3 minutes. So I would think that's, arrangement is very much a producer. But really kept us in a good mood, mostly. And introduced us to probably click tracks. Maybe we hadn't worked with click tracks before. Mm-hmm. But Martin Gilks played like a machine anyway. So that was something that if I was still drumming, I would have feared. Yeah. But Martin was just like, oh, it's fine. Just playing time, you mean?
Yeah. Oh, that thing. Yeah. That's what I'm. The one job I have to do. Yeah. If only all drummers had that attitude. So we're like, as time went on, I mean, obviously the stakes went higher, and it's that classic thing of like, okay, the first record did this, so therefore the next record's got to do more.
Yeah.
And therefore we need to have a maybe higher production value in order to start trying to go for a greater mainstream audience, etc., etc. So when was the moment that you felt a producer was really getting a bit more involved and taking more of a not necessarily a control, but more of an influence in what you were doing as a writer?
Well, everything you just mentioned, then we didn't think like that.
Right.
We didn't think we'd got to become more commercial. No, certainly not more commercial. We wanted to try other ideas. We wanted to not repeat what we'd done on the first album by the time we did the second, again with Pat Collier. And the choice was obvious to us. We had ideas. I'd switched to acoustic guitars. We had ideas of bringing a fifth instrument in, which was, banjos, mandolins, violins, bit of keyboard here and there. So we brought a guest instrumentalist in for those, who ended up joining the band. Martin Gilks, our drummer, was enjoying mucking around with drum machines and playing too. So we would start songs with a drum machine that then Martin would take over. So that was trying to bring in a dynamic. I think the head of publishing, who's now the head of Universal World, Lucian Grange, once came up to one of our rehearsals when we got Don't Let Me Down Gently for the second album. We could play that. And we played in Maybe Radio Askis, and he came to our rehearsal space in a studio near Stourbridge and played in 3 songs. But halfway through the third one, he just stopped us. And he's the head of the Polygram Publishing. And he's just like, yeah, it's all very well, but it just sounds like you. right? So we're all looking at each other going, well, that's what it's supposed to sound like. He says, I don't know, just think of something else to add to it. Girly backing vocals or saxophones was his input, to which we all fell about laughing. But actually, it was a good thing to say. I mean, like, don't let me down gently. Although we play it live without keyboards and pretty much always have, there was a period where we did have a 6-member. But you know, James Taylor for the James Taylor Quartet, we brought him in, and he plays a really significant melody on the recording of Don't Let Me Down Gently, but it can be done. So we did take his advice. It just wasn't saxophones and girly backing vocals. So we were, without Pat Collier's encouragement, we were bringing in other elements, so the drum machines and various other different instruments. But what we didn't take into the studio for the second album was songs. we had literally got 2. We got Radio Askis and Don't Let Me Down Gently. And
Golden Green.
No.
No?
Well, the song had been recorded, and the demo is exactly what you just described, where you hear a demo and it's absolutely nothing like the finished thing. But that perhaps wasn't so much Pat that rearranged that. I think it was more the bass thing, you know, our bass player. He was like, we do have another one, so a 4th song. And he wanted to do, he was into Country Joe and the Fish, and he wanted to do like a country style thing. But it hadn't been that long since With a Girlfriend in a Coma by the Smiths, and Golden Green and Girlfriend in a Coma start exactly the same, which isn't an accident. So yeah, we were doing it on our own, and Pat was quite proud of us. He was just a bit annoyed at us that we'd written less than half an album, but booked 6 weeks in the studio. So most of that got written in the studio. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing with the Wonder stuff. You, throughout all of the albums, you evolved right through to the, you know, Construction was a very, very different sounding record. It was very, very polished. I think
to me, no disrespect to either the Ramones or the Buzzcocks, I love them both, but I don't know how they kept it together for all of those years, essentially making the same record over and over again.
Yeah,
and to me that was, well, what's the point in doing that? And my favourite bands had been, you know, Public Image Limited to Magazine to the Waterboys by that point, and they never made an album that really had that much in relation to the previous one.
Yeah.
And to me, that was your job as a writer and as a band, to progress.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because, I mean, you look at a big contemporary debate at the moment, and the most recent Arctic Monkeys album.
Okay.
You know, lots of people are like, you know, I don't know. But at the same time, there are plenty of people that think it's absolutely brilliant, but they've always moved. They've always sort of shape-shifted and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And there is that hard thing, isn't it? Like, your fan base, sometimes there is a huge portion of your fan base that wants you to stay where you are.
Yeah.
And then there's a huge amount of them that would like you to move forward. And then there's the band's own aspirations. And most bands don't want to, you know, do the same thing over and over again, but a lot do. But the obviously, I think Construction, if you look at that as the final sort of chapter of it, I mean, the mix by extent, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Which is, I mean, is next level, obviously. He's so stylistic.
Yeah,
with his
incredible,
mixing.
yeah.
And I think that whole album to me sounds very, very different to the previous 3, even though there was constant travel.
Yeah.
Did Pat Collier produce Construction?
Yeah, we did all the sessions with him, but I think he said, I don't want to mix it. Because we did the 3rd album, Never Loved Elvis, with Mick Glossop. So Mick, for me, in my mind, it was, he'd done This Is the Sea by the Waterboys. But then, of course, just a quick look through his resume, he'd done the Skids, the Lurkers, the Ruts, and these are all sort of Malks bands, you know, guitar bands, punk, new wave, call them what you will. And so, originally it was, do you think Steve Lillywhite would do us? And so he again had come up through the new wave and punk thing, and obviously gone on to massive success with U2. And we wanted to grow the sound by that album, so we did. Our A&R man did ask Steve, who didn't want us. Graham Carpenter didn't want us to work with Lillywhite. He was suggesting that we produce it on our own, but I knew that we were too argumentative as a unit So first job of a producer for me with a band is you got to be a referee.
Hugely so.
You got to stop people swinging punches, and and just being difficult for the sake of being difficult, which I was very good at. So then once we told Polydor, no, we definitely haven't producers. Steve couldn't do us, so then Graham suggested Mick Glossop, and that was the first time I felt like we were produced. I mean, Pat did change arrangements and did add very important elements to the recordings. But, well, what we'd done with Glossop was I'd written pretty much the whole album. And it had, it was me. I'd got used to using a Port Studio more.
Was that a little 4-track?
Little 4-track Tascam, yeah. Malk was somewhere, I don't know where Malk's head was at that point. We'd toured America a couple of times. We'd all got American girlfriends. We were all flitting over to America when there was any time off, away from each other. And I was just in this apartment that we had in London and accidentally wrote every track apart from Welcome to the Cheap Seats, which the fiddle player Martin Bell, he wrote the instrumentation to it, and I put the song on top. So we went in so we did pre-production, pre-prod, which of course you can imagine all the infantile jokes we got out of that description of pre-production. So, and we went in with Mick Glossop, and he's just stopped us playing halfway through the second song. He's like, "Where are all your wonder stuffisms?" And we were all, "What's that?" And he's like, "All your bump, bump, rat-a-tat-tats, all your clever little Miles's right arm going with jilks, and there's just nothing. You're just ambling away through some chords with Miles singing on top." So we did pre-prod for every bit of so we'd probably go in 2 weeks at a time to the townhouse in Shepherd's Bush with Glossop, but we'd always do a bit of pre-prod first where he would remind us what we were supposed to be doing. But it wasn't a band-written album. I'd written it. Mm-hmm. And so when we got to... So we were produced then, and my goodness, did we need it. We really needed every bit of help that he gave us. Did
you walk away from that as a writer thinking, actually, I've learned a few new tricks? Or
we're quite the opposite. Again, I'm just my contrary self. What I learned from that experience was there's no fucking way I'm doing this again. So if we do make a fourth album, the rest of you cunts are going to come in and do some work as well. Because, of course, and that was because I shared all the publishing. I didn't take the writing credits. They were split 5 ways. Embarrassingly, on some of them 6 ways, because the demos that we'd done, say, for Size of a Cow, Here Comes Everyone, a few others, the original bass player had demoed those with us, so I had this stupid socialist sort of rule that if you were in the studio the first time the song was demoed, then you were a writer, which was idiotic. I'm over it now. But yeah, they don't go. So I get 12.5% of Size of a Cow when I wrote the entire damn thing. So that used to smart for a while.
Yes.
So what I said was for the 4th album was like, we're getting back into a studio, rehearsal room rather, and we're going to write together, and everyone's going to chip in ideas if this is the way we intend to carry on. But everyone had raised their game, and there'd been from the period of Eight-Legged Groove Machine to in that 6-year period or 5-year period, there'd been a lot of movement in contemporary music, full stop. There was... dance music had become the thing really in the UK. My mind had drifted off to sort of country and folk and then come back once I started seeing bands regularly like Jane's Addiction and Faith No More. All these elements. There was so much amazing music released all over the world between Eight-Legged Groove Machine and Construction. And I think we tried to take a little bit of all of it in. As much as we could, but what we did know is that we couldn't go and do 3 months in a studio again. So as much as the amazing work that Glossop did as a producer, it felt laborious at times. So we wanted to go back to recording quickly. So we went back to Pat Collier, who somewhere through the session said, "I don't want to mix this. whether that was because we were adding so many layers. We were a 6-piece by then.
Was that was Construction on tape?
Yeah.
So none of those records were done on Pro Tools.
No, God, I don't think anyone had. No, it didn't exist.
No. When was Construction recorded?
Maybe Cubase seemed to be computer recording because, of course, Pop Will Eat Itself.
Yeah.
But whether they recorded to Cubase or just ran all their samples.
I would have thought they'd run the samples.
Yeah.
And then you'd slave that.
We definitely
synth.
had 2 machines slaved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
So you kind of went from the sublime to the ridiculous after that, because you then made one of my favourite records, the Vent record with Steve Albini.
Yeah.
So what was I guess that was a bit of a culture shock, really, to work with him, or was that a breath of fresh air?
It was very much the spirit of the band. So I'd gone from being in a 6-piece Wonder Stuff. I don't know quite how long Construction took to record, but probably months, 2 or 3 months.
God, imagine having that time now to make.
I know, and I know what the townhouse was in '90. It was £1,200 a day, and we were in there for 3 months with Sundays off.
Wow!
So we ran up quite a tab.
Yeah, right.
On that. Pat Collier's studio, the Greenhouse, was probably a little bit cheaper.
Was that in Tooting?
No, it was Old Street, East London. Pat Collier went on to build a studio in Tooting, where I did solo band demos and stuff like that. But hold on, let me just collect my thoughts here. So 6-piece Wonder Stuff. Spending best part of 3 months recording it, then probably a couple of weeks mixing it with Spike Stent. Plus, we'd spent a year in our own studio. We'd built our own actual recording studio with isolation booths and tape decks and all this type of stuff to write Construction when we wrote 25 songs that were pared down to the albums, and the rest ended up on B-sides. I think 2 were just completely ditched. So it just felt like we'd been in the studio a long time. So when I formed Vent 414 with Pete Howard and Morgan Nichols, it was a 3-piece. I wanted to go back to thrashing it out and not thinking of what else can you stick on top of this, what keyboard part can you use, what sample can you use. No, let's just keep it, and no click tracks, because it was a kick-ass little 3-piece punk band, really. And I was influenced, during the writing of that, I was listening to things like Jesus Lizard, The Auteurs, Albini's band Shellac. What other thing? A lot of, Albini produced stuff. But we did look at, we looked at recording with Ted Nicely, who had done, did he do Shudder to Think? Which was my absolute favourite album of probably 95, 96. That was a 4-piece guitar band. And we also looked at Dave Sardi, and Dave Sardi had done Bark Market. So it was kind of like the noisier end of, but what you have to remember is British music had become retrogressive as far as I was concerned with the arrival of Oasis. Not so much Blur, but to me, I could, it was, one was the Beatles and the other one was the Kinks, and I didn't understand the point in looking backwards. Just, I understand the point commercially, of course, but creatively that wasn't resonating with me. So mostly what I was listening to were American bands or a couple of European bands. And so the 3 producers were Ted Nicely, Dave Sardi or Albini. Sardi wasn't available. Ted Nicely said to me, I did speak to him on the phone, and I said, do you want to do it in like April 96? He goes, I can't do April. Please wait for me, because I know who you're going to speak to next. You're going to do what every band do, and I can't fit them in. You're going to call Albini, and please don't do it. Please wait for me. And I said, no, April's when we're doing it. We've got 2 weeks. We're going to do it in 2 weeks. And Albini was my next call. He absolutely got that right.
Yeah.
And it was me. The record company, Albini wouldn't talk to managers or record companies. He had to speak to someone from the band. So that was me. So I did the deal. Actually did the deal. It was Christmas Day, because I remember I was trying to speak to him for 3 days in a row, and he would pick up the phone, and he was in his Chicago studio. I was in Shropshire. And he said, can't speak right now, call me back tomorrow. So this went on for 3 days. That was it. That's all he'd say to me. And then the third time he said, he's like, I can't speak right now, call me midday my time tomorrow. So like, Steve, it's Christmas Day tomorrow. Because I don't know what your religion is, but I'll be working. I'm like, all right. So I did it. I was around at my mum and dad's, went out to the garage, have a fag, took the phone with me, called Albini, and he just said, yeah, I like the demos. Why do you want to use me? He says, because your demos are good, release them. So he's trying to talk himself out of the job. Demos are good, why do you want to use me? And I'm like, well, you know what? When I listen to, and I listed the bands, Auteurs, Jesus Lizard, Polly Harvey, when I listen to these records, it sounds like they're all recorded in the same environment, and I want my band, Vent 414, to be recorded in that environment. And he just said, you never guess how I do that. And I went, go on. And he said, I record them all in the same environment. It's called Abbey Road. It's in London, England. You may have heard of it. I'm like, all right, okay. And then he just gave me, I think it was 8 days. He reeled them off straight to me there. And you do these 8 days. I need 40 grand in my account before I get on the plane. And then if you like what we do, give me another 10. And I'm like, all right, I'll tell the label. So come New Year, that's what I told the label. And that's exactly how it worked.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's an experience and a half. I mean, there's very few people that work like Albini. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly so many of his records have connected with me. Of course, the Vent record. I mean,
Yeah.
And it is that energy in the room that he manages to get. We've all tried to do it, and to various degrees of kind of success. But yeah, he's got a real definitive style.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's one-off for you. You, as an artist, have always been a multi-tracker, I suppose, with regards to the way you make your records.
Yeah.
And you were talking earlier about the 4-track and started when you were demoing. So when did you, so for the very first album, how did you just write the songs and bring them to a rehearsal room? When did you start having a demoing thing going on at home?
I did do. It wasn't me writing. It was very much a 4-piece. So I remember Malk coming round to my flat that I shared with Clint Mansell from Pop Will Eat Itself, who's obviously gone on to have a fantastic career as a movie composer. And Clint and Pop Will Eat Itself, they owned a 4-track. That was the first 4-track I ever saw, the little cassette ones. And that was in our flat. Malk had been round and showed me the chords to Wish Away. And I loved that. It's great. And he says, all right, well, that's how you do it. And I said, all right, well, when we get together next week, I'll have tried to have written a vocal for it, which I did. And then I said to Clint, can I use your 4-track? And I recorded the demo for that. So it was definitely a co-write. Did
you record drums and everything on it?
Oh, no, it's just 2 acoustic guitars. Two acoustic guitars and a vocal. That's all I did. No, I wasn't. I didn't want to create the band. I was in a band.
Yeah.
And you know that even though I'd been a drummer before I became the guy at the Wonder Stuff, I knew day one when we first had a little audition. Well, they were auditioning me basically. The other 3 were together. That I was nervous that I wouldn't like the drummer. as a player, not as a person. That I thought I'm going to be trying to sing and play rhythm guitar, but I'll be looking at this drummer going, I thought my head would be going, well, I wouldn't do it like that. What's he doing that for? And it was quite the opposite. As soon as whatever jam we started with, as soon as he started, I'm like, he's a fucking genius. Yeah. That's brilliant. No, I wouldn't have come up with any of that.
Yeah.
But it's so much better than anything that just happened in my head,
yeah.
When we started the jam. So I was very lucky like that. So we never tried to make Port Studio demos to try and sound like the band. We got our own Port Studio by the time we were into 8-Legged Groove Machine. So things like Sing the Absurd, Song Without an End, Meaner Than Mean, some of those odder B-side tracks that we actually recorded in Redditch with Dave Morris. They'd have been done on Port Studios, but and Jilks would program the beats. No, it was very much a band effort, and I never, maybe I tried when I was doing. I've got like Port Studio demos still of Donation, a couple of tracks from Never Loved Elvis, and I've tried to program the drums, but it was a stupid thing to do. It was a waste of time because Jilks would always make it better.
Yeah. So when we first started working together, obviously it was Escape from Rubbish Island, which had started as a Miles Hunt solo album.
Yeah.
And then you recorded all of that and produced it pretty much all yourself.
Yeah.
And you just needed real drums.
Yeah.
And Luke Johnson was your choice, obviously, going back, the son of the mighty Les Johnson, who you've had a long career with. And then obviously Les put you in touch with me, and then I recorded the drums, and then that evolved into the whole album kind of got re-recorded in the studio, and we made the record. So, and more recently on your current album, we recorded the drums here at Vada.
Yeah.
But everything else was done at home, in your home studio.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Because that's backwards to me in terms of you get the drums down first, and then everyone plays to the drums. But we're at this point now with technology where the drums can be the last thing to go down.
Yeah, and so I mean, obviously, the hint that you've sort of given me so far is that when you were back in the day in the One Stuff days, you'd be the Porter studio thing, and the demoing was kind of it's a means to an end.
Yeah.
It's a notebook.
Yeah,
and obviously you have developed those skills.
Yeah,
because you effectively produce yourself now, so you have become a producer as well as an engineer. You know how to get guitar tones and stuff like that. So when did that start happening?
I suppose I'm going to guess that it'd be 1997, and the multi-instrumentalist that had been in the One Stuff, Martin Bell, he had a job with Mark of the Unicorn, Motu. Mm-hmm. Now, did they invent Logic?
No, that was E-Magic. But you'd always have a Motu with your Logic rig.
So he was the London guy. So when people were starting to do sessions at the London studios with Logic, and I think it was specifically Logic, I don't remember Pro Tools ever being talked about then, that if a producer was having a problem with Logic, Martin was 0898 help,
Yeah.
So he had a sort of, no-name computer with Logic on that he said, you should start to get into this. I've got just, a tiny box room in my little house in the countryside. So I bought that little rig off him, and he gave me a day's sort of tuition, and he was like, it's just a more advanced, the way he described it, because he knew I know how to use Porter Studios, it's just a more advanced Porter Studio. Just think of it in exactly the same way. And I did really enjoy it, but it did nothing for my songwriting.
Interesting.
Absolutely. I have got demos and demos and demos that if I play, maybe I've played them to you over the years, but I think if any fans of what I do, they wouldn't know it was me. And I was writing songs, but they weren't. There was no commercial value to them, and I was just enjoying what you could do, like while away hours on Logic. Mm. And so I enjoyed that, but forgot to write songs, and pretty much forgot who I was. Forgot what it was likely that people wanted to hear me do. So I was listening to bands like Golden Palominos, that are their sessions records, so different players, people from Cannes, or it could be Jar Wobble, it could be John Lydon, but it was all held together by, he sadly passed away recently, Anton Fier. If you look up an album called Pure by the Golden Palominos, and I think the vocalist on that, her name will come to me. It's just one female vocalist all the way through. And Michael Stipe was part of it. Jack Bruce was part of it. And they were still writing songs, as well as where can you take production now with all this technology coming in. So I was writing stuff that I had no business at all to be trying to write, like low bass grooves, singing right down here rather than my recognizable nasal whine. So yeah, I spent a year basically in my box room writing nothing that I've ever let really surface. But I did enjoy mucking around with the computers. And then so by the time you and I meet in the early 2000s, I'd remembered that, okay, I'm supposed to sound like this, aren't I? And working with Mark McCarthy, who was our bass player for a good number of years. We were living together in London at that time, and I'd got a more updated Logic system, and he was actually very intuitive with it all. He wanted to make his own, I suppose, not dance records, but loops and stuff, and I would show him how it all works. And out of that, we started demoing, as you rightly said, what was going to be the next Miles Hunt solo album, which then quickly I'm like, and you say to me, like, I am an engineer, I am a producer, because I know how to get guitar tones. No, I know how to get guitar tones. They're shit. When I think of like Mark Treese, when Mark Treese plugs into an amp, he spends some time, he knows what he's looking for.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Mark Gemini Thwaite,
Yeah.
Another guitarist in the One stuff these days. These guys know what they're doing.
I think this is a frontman thing, because I was talking to Tom Clark on this podcast, and honestly, he couldn't give two fucks about his guitar tone. He knows it's just one
On the finished article, or while he's writing?
It's the whole thing. It's just
Okay.
the enemy guitar tone is just gnarly and
Okay.
and he's never really spent a long time
Right.
labouring over tones.
Well, his head's elsewhere because he's the songwriter and
Yeah.
he's the vocalist. Yeah.
But it is interesting that some people, they did find the introduction of the recording side and the knowledge of recording into their writing practice had a dramatic influence, a positive influence.
Okay.
But at the same time, there is that thing that we've all discussed of when you can sit down to write a song and then you just do end up spending hours fucking about with Logic and little, that's a cool effect.
Yeah.
And so and so forth. But I mean, when you write now and you record now at home, do you keep that recording process a real bare minimum part of it? You just you don't try and get too bogged down.
That's very much the intention.
Yeah.
But I do. I do get bogged down. And to be honest, I haven't recorded anything for over 2 years. And I don't feel it coming back either. I feel it's very odd the last 2 years. Songs, I don't sit down to try to write a song. They just arrive in my head. So I can be washing up, I can be out walking my dog, a lyric, a beat, a melody will just arrive in my head, and I'm like, shit, and I'll grab something to record whatever that idea is, like a dictaphone used to be. That hasn't happened. It has left me in the last 2 years. And actually feels good. It feels good because I've always had something nagging at me since I was a teenager. And I'm quite enjoying the silence in my head at the minute. So I didn't enjoy... I would have done anything to have had the money to be able to employ somebody else to run the Logic rig, the space bar, the fucking mouse. My eyes are shot to shit now from staring at computers for so many years. And and just fucking rolling my chair over leads, as neat and tidy as an OCD as I am. Just the amount of shouting and swearing I do on my own in a room when I'm recording, and then hoping that my dog won't bark on a take, things like that. So I would love to be able to go into a studio. I would love it to be 1998 in terms of the budget that I had and the talent I was surrounded by. That's what I want.
Yeah.
But all of that costs money, so that I don't have. And I never wanted to be a producer. I never wanted to have a designated room in my house that I keep the door shut most of the time now, me on the other side of it, on the house side of it. So it was all... Whilst there's probably a period of like, oh, this is all quite exciting. And this is interesting, being able to make this sort of quality demo at home. They weren't that good. It always took coming to someone like yourself, Luke Johnson, the life he put into Rubbish Island just by being a brilliant drummer. Then, all of your expertise and experience that you put into, forward in those recordings. That's what I want. That's what I want all the time.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because when I do bits of writing and stuff, and for the television music, and I I'll play the bass, I'll play the guitars,
Yeah.
I'll do the vocals on it, etc. And I'll always have that kind of ambivalence towards it. So I go, it's all right.
Yeah.
And then the moment I get a real drummer in, or for example, if it's like if I want it to be a female vocalist, there's a girl Lucy I work with,
Yeah.
and the moment she sings on it,
Yeah.
for me, the moment somebody else gets their hands on it and does something, it becomes 100% better.
Always.
And now I almost wait. So I'll finish something and be like, okay, I don't really like that, but I know it'll be fine when somebody else has put their mark on it. And I think that's really common, and I think it's really easy to be quite dismissive. I've learned that particularly where I really have hated something, almost been embarrassed to play it to my publisher.
Yeah.
And then real drums or the actual vocal that's intended has gone on there.
Yeah.
And I actually can't believe how much enjoyment and pride I've actually got from that piece of music. And you know, and I've really picked up on that recently, that I have to take that into consideration, because a lot of things have gone in the bin.
Right.
And I think, actually, no.
All you needed was one more person to come in, just bring a little bit of magic to it.
Yeah.
And
I think it is difficult when you do sort of work alone to find yourself in and argue yourself into that negative corner.
Yeah.
And that is the perils of working alone. I mean, obviously, you said you don't have an engineer, your own engineer on hand, like Prince at Paisley Park, Bollydoon Park. But what like you've just got a basic Logic setup.
Yeah. And one of those little red boxes with 2 ins, 2 outs.
Yeah. And that's
I don't even know what it's called.
Yeah.
I've never spent more than 150 quid on a microphone. Well, years and years ago, I had an AKG 414, but it was so expensive I was frightened to touch it.
What mic do you use now then?
I got a Rode NT1 or NT2, and then there's a British company, I don't know if they're still going, Sontronics. They discounted me onto, they look like, they do, I don't know anything about equipment. They do the same job as a AKG 414, so whatever that sort of microphone is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people have said, when I've taken something that I've recorded at home to be mixed elsewhere, they'll go, "Oh, that microphone's a bit harsh," and I'm like, "Well, just EQ it. Just do. I don't know what the green button on the massive desk does, and it's also none of my business. My business is to bring a song here, so EQ it so it's not harsh." I'm not going to go and spend $1,000 on something when I can just get you to turn the high mid down. And I don't, particularly with my voice, I'm not blessed with a great voice. You don't need an expensive microphone to record my voice. You got somebody like Peter Gabriel, who's there are so many layers and so much depth to his singing voice. Yes, put the most expensive Neumann or whatever in front of him that you can get your hands on, because it's going to be worth it. It's not with me. No point in putting a $5,000 mic in front of me. I'm just going to spit on it.
I think you sell yourself a little bit short.
No. But there have been points, particularly when Erica, the Wonder Stuff's violinist, Erica Knuckles, when she and I made 2 albums together in the mid-2000s. So that would be the next thing that I did after you and I worked on Escape from Rubbish Island and Suspended by Stars. And then the next thing I did was a couple of me and Erica albums. And I think I enjoyed that period, but we lived together, we were in a relationship together. So she was the talent to me. So I didn't really, so I could program some drums. So things that I did love about recording with the computer was Andres Carew, the Wonder Stuff's sometime drummer. He lives in Queens, New York. So I could send him a demo from Shropshire overnight, or a piece me and Erica were working on. Go, I don't suppose you fancy doing some real drums on this. And he lived in his own studio in Queens. And in the morning we'd wake up and there'd be the file of mixed stereo file of drums, because that was another thing. He's like, do you want all the channels? Oh, fuck. I'm messing around with all that. Just you mix the drums and send them to me in a stereo file. And then we just drop those into the track. That was amazing. And I would come up probably on those albums with whatever the first idea was to get the song rolling. But then Erica would say, can you just go away for a couple of days and leave me with these? And I'd come back and she'd put all her magic on there. Not just violins, she'd put keyboard ideas on there. She'd put things on there that perhaps could be mimicked by electric guitars later. So that was great. I had someone to work with.
Yeah, enjoying somebody else's
Yeah.
creativity.
And, coming back in the house and going, holy shit, I wasn't expecting you to do that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Those, it's as lovely and as convenient the computer side of recording can be. For me, it still goes back to what teenage me. I wanted to work with talented people. I wanted to be in a gang first and foremost, and I wanted to feed off other people's talent and be impressed by other people's talent. That's still what I want, but it's just it's
different era now, isn't
it's
it?
very difficult to do. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, how many albums have you made now?
No idea.
It's got to be over 10.
I think there's 9 albums of original Wonder Stuff material. Then there's a Wonder Stuff covers album when we did From the Midlands with Love covers. There is one Vent album. It's probably 16, 17 actual albums, maybe. Yeah.
So
I'm glad you didn't let me just sit there and count through.
That would be cruel. No, but it's funny. Like, you look at that era and of 16 albums from 1986 to now 2024. Would you say? I mean, obviously, the eras have changed, the times have changed, the way in which we record has changed.
Yeah.
Would you say there's been any consistency with, as a recording artist, as to the which you like to work? Is there one thing, like one environment, one common thread through all 16 of those albums that you could say, well, that's one thing I've got to have. That's the one thing I always go out of my way to ensure I've got that environment? Or would you say you've totally changed it up every time?
No. I've tried to develop it. I've tried not to purposely go, okay, let's try and capture that vibe from that album from 10 years ago. Let's just try and do that again. I've never done that. I may have accidentally done that, but that's never been the point of going into a piece of music. I would say, like everything else in my life, I've got a really short attention span. So things for me have to be done at a pace,
right,
to keep me interested.
Yeah.
I know that if I'm labouring over something, I'm not going to be making it better.
Yeah.
So that's always been true, but certainly in the last 2 album projects I worked on, my last solo and the last Wonder Stuff, I am now trying to work with that as a mantra. Let's not labour over this. If it's not working, throw that track away. I'd say that, yeah, trying not to labour over anything, because I've just learned it doesn't make it better.
Yeah.
Not for me, anyway.
Those drum tracks we did with Pete on the last album, I think we did, 12 drum tracks in a day?
Yeah, more or less. I think we tickled a couple of alternative ideas on the second day. But, that's the sort of thing you can do. That, again, that's going back to someone's talent.
Yeah, you've got to have the drummer to be able to do that.
Yeah, and those were 2 joyous days here at Vada working with Pete Howard on, just because, I mean, you and I, you have your notes in front of you and you're making notes for how certain edits are going to work, and that, but you and I, we're basically staring at the carpet, we're listening intently to what Pete's doing. And then he will do a fill or some crazy bit, and both our heads lifted up at the same time. We looked at each other and we're like, wow, that. And then you already got it, Milo, and you were already writing the note. Like, that was a killer fill.
It's the energy, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the thing that you've... That's one thing I've always noticed about you in the studio. It's an energy.
Yeah.
You're quite... I'm trying to think of the right word. But you're like... You're quite frenetic in the studio. I've always found there's a boy-like energy that is different to you in other areas of your career. I mean, you've got loads of energy live, but you in the studio, there is a different level of energy.
Yeah,
and that makes perfect sense, because that's the nice thing as well. It's like, I'm very grateful for this. You and I have both worked in the music industry for a long time, and I still can get very excited by things, like I did when I was 15.
Definitely. Definitely.
And that's the one thing that I think keeps me going.
Yeah.
There is a lot of fluff between all the good bits, as we both know.
Yeah. I mean, I still find myself, I'm an air drummer. You know, when I'm really, really enjoying myself, sitting with a friend or a couple of friends and we're banging out some tunes, I immediately go to the air drums. And even say, wait, listen to what he's going to do. You're an air guitarist, aren't you?
I flip between the two.
Do you? You air drum too?
Yeah, I'm not a very good air guitarist.
Interestingly, I'm a right-handed guitarist in real life.
Yeah.
When I air guitar, I'm left-handed.
Now that is very,
Isn't that
very
odd?
weird.
Always have been.
Do you air guitar and air drum to your own stuff ever?
Air drum, because it wouldn't have been me that did it, so I'm sort of paying whichever Wonder Stuff drummer would be listening to, I'm paying them a compliment by air drumming. To air guitar. Oh, actually, since MGT, Mark Gemini Thwaites come in and done some remarkable one-take solos on the last Wonder Stuff album. There'd be like a piece I just left in the song that, like, MGT, can you stick a solo in there? And he always goes, what do you want? I'm like, a solo, I just said. Yeah, but what kind of solo? And then he will go, Mick Ronson, John McGough, or who's our other one? Jay Mascis. Oh, this is definitely a Ronson. And both times he's done it in one take.
Wow.
And that's it. And he said, no, let me do it again. No, you're not doing it again. That is just astonishing. Got the chicken skin, every hair on my body, apart from the long ones on my head, all stood on end.
The fizz.
The fizz.
The fizz.
The fizz.
The fizz.
Yeah. And maybe if I was playing that to someone and go, let's quickly listen to The Guy with the Gift and listen to MGT solo, I will probably air guitar that, but definitely left-handed.
Left-handed.
But I would never air guitar my own stuff. I think that would be churlish.
I've spent many a year air guitaring your stuff. So, in all your years, everybody's got them, their best and their worst studio moments.
Ooh. I liked when I was listening to Tom Clark's episode of your podcast, and I think you told me this story anyway, but it was quite interesting hearing it from him, that you'd done some beautiful string arrangement recordings and the power went down and you didn't know whether the drives had saved it.
Yeah.
And that was his worst, wasn't it?
Yeah. And also, it was his best and worst.
Okay.
I think he was just being sort of like one for the price of two there.
Okay. Well, best will be entirely about fun. So of course, I'm in the backing band for Vic Reeves' number one, Dizzy, and all I do is a little bit of backing vocal on the whole thing. Maybe played tambourine, maybe that was jokes. So of course, spending 3 days in a windowless room with Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer was obviously my best experience.
How many days did you take?
I think they were in the studio with us for 3 days.
Just solid drinking, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, there was quite a bit of drinking, just roaring, laughing and jamming. So they put me back on the drums. Bob Mortimer plays bass guitar pretty well, actually. He's an Andy Fraser from Free fan.
Right.
And Vic Reeves knows every Free song, so we were sort of doing Free jams and Mount kicking him. So that was enormous fun. Aside from fun, of being just so impressed, was when we had Kirsty MacColl guest vocal on Welcome to the Cheap Seats. And hearing, as I used to say at the time, when we were doing interviews around promoting the record, hearing her astonishing voice go down on our stupid ditty was incredible.
Yeah.
That was incredible. Worst studio experiences would just be the early days of, petty walkouts, when Martin Gilks decided that, so we had this song, The Animals and Me, for 8-Legged Groove Machine. And it was like a West Coast sort of birdsy thing, the way we're birds as in BYRDS. And I hated it. I think we all hated it, really. And then Gilks decided that if he didn't play drums on it, but just wrote kind of like a four to the floor drum machine program thing, then it might inspire something. And I thought, well, this is definitely worth pursuing. And probably what will happen is Martin will enjoy messing around with the drum machines. We'll get something, we'll take it away from what it currently is. And then Martin will eventually play the drums on it. But the arrangement will have gone on a journey inspired by Martin's decision. And Rob the bass thing Jones just hated it. He just hated it. It wasn't about what it sounded like. It was on principle. He didn't want to be in a drum machine band. He thought that was bollocks. And there was, once you were on the receiving end of a Bob Jones, decision, there was no movement.
Yeah.
And he walked out and didn't come back for 2-3 days. And I hated the fact that we allowed those sort of things to happen.
Mm.
I mean, it was all recovered in the end. And then Bob famously scratched off when we didn't, he played on it in the end, but only because we told him that the White Lines Grandmaster Flash bass line now fitted the song.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And he enjoyed doing an impersonation of that because it made him laugh. But he thought the song was awful. And when he got the vinyl copy of the album, when it was pressed, he took a badge off the lapel of his biker's leather and just scratched the track off his copy of the vinyl in front of the rest of us. That was his fucking shit. So yeah, just those sort of moments. Really, I'm failing to think of a potentially catastrophic technical error that Tom Clark talked about. No,
you've been lucky.
Just falling out.
Yeah. Well, Milo, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been so cool chatting.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Matt.
And happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, love. We should perhaps go and listen to it.
I think, do you know what? I think that's a very good idea, and that's exactly what we shall do.